Roses, the House of York, the Yorkists, against the House of Lancaster, the Lancastrians. In October 1460, Richard Plantagenet claimed the throne for the House of York. Victory was short-lived, however. Richard and his second son, Edmund, were killed at the Battle of Wakefield in December that year. Richard's claim to the throne was inherited by his son Edward, who defeated the Lancastrians in a succession of battles and was declared King Edward IV, King of England, in 1461. And that is who we are going to look at today. So Edward IV lived from the 28th of April 1442 to the 9th of April 1483. And again we have this strange split of leadership here. We've got two different time periods. We have him reigning from the 4th of March 1461 to the 3rd of October 1470, and then again from the 11th of April 1471 to the 9th of April 1483, so a period of just a few months where he wasn't the King of England. I wonder what happened. So, the handsome heartthrob, who won the Wars of the Roses, Yorkist King Edward IV, nearly messed up his victory by marrying a beautiful Lancastrian. His mother fumed, his brother rebelled, his friend Richard Neville tried to knock him off the throne, but Edward was pretty good at taking charge. He ignored his mum, drowned his brother, and beat Neville in battle. Once he'd wiped out all his competition, he set about enjoying himself. Oh, this sounds like it's going to be a good one. Alright, so Edward was the son of Richard, Duke of York, who had been a protector of the young Henry VI. Richard had taken charge when Henry VI grew too ill to reign, but this didn't go down well with Henry's wife, Margaret, and the other members of Henry's Lancastrian family. Suddenly, England was at war with itself. Richard and his family, the House of York, pitted against Margaret and the Lancastrians. Richard was killed, and his eldest surviving son, Edward, became the next Duke of York. Edward had started battling for his dad and the York cause as soon as he was old enough. He was a brave and determined fighter, and it wasn't long before a Yorkist victory put 18-year-old Edward on the throne, the first Yorkist king. He was tall, handsome, and good at making money for the country. Edward had the qualities required to be a superb king, but his selfish personality could also drive people mad. Oh, he sounds so full of himself. He fell in love with and married the Lancastrian Elizabeth Woodville. It was a secret wedding which caused scandal in the Yorkist court. Not least, he gave his wife's family all sorts of important positions at court. Although Richard Neville knocked Edward off the throne temporarily, putting back Henry VI, Edward came back with a vengeance, which explains this strange period of time here. The second time around, he was a bit better behaved, and people felt like England was getting back on its feet after years of brutal decide whether he liked his big brother being king or not. At first, he supported Edward. Then he changed his mind and went over to the side of his father-in-law, the rebellious Richard Neville, Earl of Warwick, also known as the Kingmaker, and tried to overthrow his own brother. When that didn't look like it was going to work out, Neville was killed in battle. George decided that actually he did like his big brother after all, but it was too late. Edward wouldn't forgive his brother and had him executed. The story goes that Edward had George drowned in a barrel of wine. Now that's a way to go. Royal romance. Edward IV couldn't resist a pretty face, and the prettiest of all belonged to a widow 5 years his senior, Elizabeth Woodville. Completely head over heels in love, Edward married Elizabeth in secret in 1464. It had to be secret because the king's friends and supporters wanted him to marry a French princess, and Elizabeth wasn't even very high up in the nobility. What was worse was she was a Lancastrian. When the marriage was revealed, Edward's family were fuming, but Edward refused to give up his new queen, and although Edward would go on to chase all sorts of other women, he always came back to his wife, with whom he had 10 children. Wow. Yeah, I don't like this guy. He seems like a bit of a jerk. Alright, so here we have Edward the Fourth. I mean, he looks a bit slimy if you ask me. I mean, it looks like he's suffering from really bad allergies. His face looks really puffy. And just, I don't know, I wouldn't. I mean, how many necklaces do you want? There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But I do like this thing he's wearing, this like kimono-y shawl kind of thing. I mean, he doesn't really look like a good king. And so that's his portrait. Now let's look at the timeline of events. So in 1442, Edward is born. In 1464, Edward IV secretly marries Elizabeth Woodville. Let's have a look. Okay, so apparently she was like the most beautiful woman ever. That's a severe hat. So Elizabeth Woodville, 1437 to 1492, she was known as the Baroness Grey of Groby, later Queen Elizabeth, as his stunning, and secret wife. The revelation of Lancastrians, Elizabeth's marriage to Edward IV, caused a scandal at the Yorkist court. Elizabeth was crowned queen, but it didn't mean everybody wanted to treat her royally. In fact, her new mother-in-law refused to call her queen at all. Harsh. In spite of his battles and affairs, Elizabeth's marriage to Edward IV produced 10 children, including the princes in the Tower and the future Queen Elizabeth, wife of the first Tudor king, Henry VII. The princes in the Tower, hopefully we'll come on to that later on, but that's a very, very famous story about 2 young boys who were locked up in the tower and they mysteriously vanished. I think it was Richard II or Richard III who was responsible for their death, and I think recently their bodies have been discovered because nobody knows where they went. But that's a story for another day. Her plotting put her daughter on the throne, and so this ordinary beauty became the ancestor of all monarchs to come. Well, that is very, very interesting. So in 1470, Henry VI is put back on the throne, and in 1471, Edward the Fourth finally defeats the Lancastrians. 1449 to 1478, he was a Duke of Clarence, and he was the younger brother of Edward IV. Younger brothers of kings, if they behave themselves, usually have a pretty good time. But George didn't want to behave himself, and he didn't want to be the younger brother. George wanted to be king. He was weak, however, when his brother was strong. His first rebellion failed, and he ended up creeping back to his brother with his tail between his legs. Well, one rebellion can be forgiven, but two. George went too far, and according to rumour, found himself face down in a barrel of wine. A sticky end indeed. I can think of worse ways to go. And in 1483, Edward IV dies. So, let's have a look at some people that we haven't had a look at yet, because there are so many people here. Cecily Neville. So, Cecily Neville, 1415 to 1495, was the Duchess of York, and she was married to Richard, Duke of York, and she was determined, beautiful and smart. When her son became king as Edward IV, Cecily was horrified to discover that he'd married a Lancastrian widow instead of the princess that she had in mind. After her son's death, she had his children declared illegitimate, and so secured the throne for her other son, Richard. Ooh, that's cheeky. Elizabeth Woodville, we've looked at you. George Plantagenet, we've looked at you. Edward V, we're coming on to next. Richard of Shrewsbury. He was the Duke of York. He lived from 1473 to about 1483. Richard was the second son of Edward IV. Richard's father died when he was just 10 years old. The new king was Richard's brother, Edward, but Edward was also just a child, and the two boys were up against a whole bunch of greedy grown-ups. Helpless, they were locked in the tower and never seen again. So he was one of the princes in the tower, which we are going to come on to. Elizabeth of York. This was the daughter of Edward IV and the wife of Henry VII. So we'll leave her for another day. Edward Plantagenet of Warwick. We'll come on to him again, who is Margaret Plantagenet. We'll come on to her later. John de la Pole. We'll come on to you a bit later as well. So, it sounds like Edward IV was a bit of a playboy. He did what he pleased, and got rid of those who displeased him. So let's do the quiz and see how much we have retained in our memory. So, question 1 of 4. Edward IV was the son of Henry VI. I'm gonna say true. Oh no. I get so confused Neville. I'm going Richard Neville. Correct. Edward was betrayed by his so-called friend Richard Neville. Question 4 of 4. Edward the Fourth had his brother George Plantagenet, Duke of Clarence, killed for plotting to overthrow him. Was this false or was this true? Yes, in a vat of wine, I think. Correct. The story goes that Edward the Fourth had his rebellious younger brother drowned in a barrel of wine. We scored 3 crowns out of 4. So, Edward the Fourth, described as a heartthrob, I don't see it myself, who did what he pleased, was very, very determined and headstrong. He married Lancastrian, much to the displeasure of his family. But his mother got the last laugh when when Edward the Fourth died. His mother made all of his 10 children illegitimate, which was quite a horrible thing to do, but there we are. And it seemed that he just, did what he wanted. But in the end, like most kings, he met a premature end because of his bad health, probably caused by drinking and partying and all of that stuff. And unfortunately, this kicked off all of the trouble of the Wars of the Roses again. So that is Edward the Fourth, and we are going to be moving on to this fellow here next time, Edward the Fifth. They saw it fit not to give him a proper portrait, but yes, that's Edward the Fourth. So I really hope that you have enjoyed this video and found it to be relaxing as well as informative. I wish you a wonderful rest of your day, whatever you're doing,